I officially have more reasons as to why we need to teach modern media in schools and cut out with the emphasis on old literature from over 100 years ago and stop with the Shakespeare. So I've already made a post about this. I already made a video about it. And since Turning Red has come out, now I haven't seen the movie, but I've seen the marketing materials for it and I've seen people talk about it. But I've had it up to here. I'm done with seeing parents on Twitter and Facebook really upset that it was an allegory for periods and to a lesser extent puberty as a whole, which I thought was like the most obvious thing based on the marketing materials. If you look at any of the trailers, it's very clearly about a young girl starting puberty, going through that kind of change and how that's distressing, etc., etc. Now, it's very clearly an allegory for starting periods, but which is to lesser extent starting puberty. And so I'm making because I saw one tweet that was especially upsetting to me because a mom watched it with her 9 and 13-year-old sons, and then after watching the movie, the kids had questions about girls and their periods, etc., which is the logical conclusion. And she was really upset that there was no warning that it was an allegory for puberty. And this just harkens back to the reason we need to teach media literacy, especially modern media literacy, because allegories are done differently now than how they were 100 years ago, or how they were when Shakespeare wrote. Now I'm going to actually reference Animal Farm here, which was actually one of my favorite books to read in high school because most of the discussion revolved around the history of the Russian Revolution, which I just thought was fascinating. But looking at that, it's a very clear allegory. But allegories, the reason they're an allegory is because they don't say it outright, so obviously there isn't going to be a warning something's an allegory. But based on the marketing materials, you should be able to tell that it's an allegory for puberty. It does everything but outright say it. It's a preteen girl, who is very clearly preteen, who is in, her junior high school, her high school, and she starts going through a change that she doesn't understand, which I think is made very clear in the trailers when she gets her surprise faces, when she's very confused as to what's happening. She's very distressed when she turns into a big red panda. But apparently not. Apparently to a bunch of people, that wasn't obvious. Or perhaps they didn't expect that a Disney movie would actually discuss periods and would discuss these kinds of topics through a lens that is appropriate for children. And when I say appropriate for children, I mean in terms of media. Obviously, a child does not want to sit through a lecture on what a period is and how puberty works. I think it's perfectly acceptable to talk about puberty with your kids who are going through it or about to go through it. So it's the fact, I don't know, I guess boiling it down, it's the fact that these parents are complaining that there wasn't a warning when any kind of allegory, you don't put a warning because it's meant to be picked up through subtext and analysis. But the fact that they didn't clue in based on the marketing materials. Like, everything about this movie has very clearly been about that going through puberty. And for some reason, for these parents, that just didn't click with them. And that's what's upsetting to me, is that through all of this very obviously, it's about puberty, they didn't pick up that it was about puberty. And again, it's very much like Animal Farm. It does everything but say what it's saying. It basically beats you over the head with the message without saying it explicitly. Turning into a big red panda, having your period. It's almost a one-to-one. It's like a one-to-one of having Animal Farm, the pigs lead a revolution, etc., etc. Pigs who directly correspond to historical figures, and then Russian Revolution. It's a one-to-one allegory, as is Turning Red. Now again, I haven't seen it, but I've seen a lot of people talking about it, read about it. I just haven't had the chance to get around to watching it. But very clearly through the marketing material, you can tell it's a turning into a big red panda is the metaphor for having your period. And the fact that these parents, A, couldn't pick up on it is distressing. And B, the fact that they don't think it's appropriate for kids who are about to start having their periods or who are about to start having friends who are having periods, think it's inappropriate to talk about periods, is a whole other mess of just, do you really think that you can keep your children blind to it? Periods aren't shameful. They're perfectly natural. They're what the human body does. And to think that, like, they're going to have friends who are having them, or they themselves are going to have them, depending on if, you know, what their bodies are. And then to say that it's inappropriate to discuss it, or even to the extent it's inappropriate to have an allegory discussing it, blows my mind.